on the 3rd floor, and that should be more space for people if there's not enough space here. If there's a person on the overflow room that wants to give a comment, make sure that you turn in your comment card at the registration table or to Jennifer. You can be at the overflow room, but during the comment section, please come back to the courtroom. And those are my announcements. I'm going to open it up for the introduction. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Hayden. I'm the Dean of this law school. I've been here as a faculty member for 20 years, and we're honored to have you all here. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to the panelists, very distinguished panelists. A special recognition, since I am the Dean of this law school, to a student group that's one of the sponsors here tonight, and that's the Labor and Employment Society. This is a law school dedicated to the public interest. This is also a law school dedicated to providing a forum for the discussion of important policy issues, and this, of course, is a very important policy issue. I would like next to call to the podium Evelyn Hernandez, who is a native of El Salvador, who has resided in the United States for 23 years. Ms. Hernandez?
Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por estar esta tarde aquí. Voy a pedirles que presten mucha atención en lo que voy a decir. Mucha gente aquí y en todas partes del país han sido separados de sus seres queridos de manera permanente debido a la violencia que se vive por las deportaciones. Para poder curar esas heridas como comunidad necesitamos abordar las causas de la violencia y adoptar alternativas enfocadas en justicia y rehabilitación social. Tomemos un minuto de silencio para honrar a las personas que han perdido su vida por la violencia o que han sido víctimas de deportación, y mantengamos sus espíritus presentes con nosotros esta noche. Les pido que guardemos silencio, por favor, por un minuto. Gracias. Espero tener una buena participación ahora con todos ustedes y les paso el micrófono.
Thank you very much. I'd like now to introduce to you Pastor Jean Rose Smith. She's the Executive Director, Campus Minister of the Wesley Foundation, UCLA, United Methodist Church. She works with students, communities, and congregations as an advocate for the sacred worth, dignity, and access for all families, especially immigrant families, LGBTQ families. Jean works closely with Ideas at UCLA, Outback Immigration Task Force, the Filipino Migrant Center, to engage and respond to the challenges of immigration, access, and justice. Reverend Smith.
I want to invite you all to just take a moment to breathe in the fragrance and the aroma that is here. this earth, to acknowledge that we stand in this space, the ancestral ground of the Tonga Gabrielian people, whose property was taken from them, whose culture was destroyed, and we are all part of that story. And so we give honor and thanks to that community as we search today for answers that will bring us together to restore creation, to restore created, to restore communities, so that we can continue to pursue together pathways of justice, pathways of peace. Help us to consider the value of each and every life before us here, the lives we represent, the communities that we are part of. Remind us that we are all part of the problem and we are all part of the solution. In the words of Edward Galeano, because every single one of us has something to say to the others, something that deserves to be celebrated and forgiven by others. And so tonight I invite us all to come together, to seek justice, to share our joys and our struggles and our sorrows, and to remember that we come from this ground, this sacred Mother Earth, and we are part of this story, and our stories matter, and our presence matters, and our families matters, and our hopes and our dreams matter. And so let us move forward together to find that way towards a more just, peaceful, and compassionate community of Earth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like now to introduce to you Pablo Alvarado. Mr. Alvarado has served as the Executive Director of the National Day Labor Organizing Network over the past dozen years. This organization is currently a collaboration of 46 community-based day labor organizations, and under his guidance, the NDLON has worked with local governments to establish safe worker centers, to provide information to workers, to help them handle and deal with exploitation, to improve their skills, and to gain access to essential services. He's helping to build immigrant leadership and to strengthen local worker groups. Mr. Alvarado.
Buenas tardes tengan todos y todas. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this conversation today. In recent weeks, we've seen tragedy used as an excuse to promote bigotry and hatred. The adversaries of immigrants are on the move in our country. After being on the defensive and on the losing side of the fights for LGBTQ rights, for criminal justice reform, and even for the removal of the Confederate flag. But they are coming together, they're unifying to scapegoat migrants, to blame the so-called sanctuary cities, and to exploit tragedy in order to cast a cloud of suspicion on all migrants, and I would say people of color in general. So we don't know what's going to happen with the immigration debate in a broken Congress in Washington, D.C. We don't know what the fate for DAPA and DACA in the court is going to be. And we don't know how far the Obama administration is going to go to comply with a deportation and detention quota. There are indeed multiple dimensions of uncertainty for migrant communities and for the country in general. So moving forward, we must understand that the need for physical safety is a value that we all share. Not just the segment of white people who fear actually the change in demographics. The simple fact is that using deportation as punishment does not advance the interest of public safety. On the contrary, policies that turn police officers and sheriff deputies into deportation agents makes us all unsafe. It undermines the trust in law enforcement, and as we've seen in Arizona, in Georgia, in Alabama, and in many other places, including our state in California, it has resulted in massive civil rights violations. So this is the moment in which we are in right now, and we expect that this conversation guide our city, our county, to ensure that we protect immigrants from all uncertainties, from all existing threats. So this is the time for us to have a conversation that infuses a sense of humanity, a conversation that brings reason to this immigration debate that has been poisoned with so much hatred and bigotry. And for the greater good, this is the moment for immigrants and their allies to reassert, to recommit, to organize, and to reassert, not just Los Angeles, but the entire country, that the only secure community is that community that is organized. And that is what migrants have to do here in LA and show the way. And we expect that the political class in Los Angeles and our county does the same thing. So let's have an honest, intelligent conversation tonight. Muchas gracias. Y se me olvidaba presentar a nuestra querida Norma Roque. Was forgetting to introduce our beloved Norma Roque, whom I call a friend, and thank you for all the years of reporting for Los Angeles community. It is because of Norma's work that not just Latinos, but all Angelinos are well informed around not just the issue of migration, but the many issues that affect our communities. So Norma Roque will be moderating this forum tonight. So let's welcome our beloved Norma Roque.
Thank you, Pablo. Can you hear me well? Yes, good evening. It is a pleasure and it's an honor. I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to Red Nacional de Jornaleros, to Carecen, to the UCLA Labor Center and the organizers of this very, very important evening. It's on behalf also of KNEX, Channel 24 Univision. It is, again, a pleasure and an honor to be here with this evening and to welcome you once again. Thank you so much. And I'm going to have the honor to tell you about our distinguished group of guest speakers this evening. Hello, how are you? Okay, the panelists are these. First of all, Mr. Chuy Garcia, Cook County Commissioner. Garcia currently serves as Commissioner to Cook County. He was elected to that position in 2009. He has also served as an alderman and a state senator in Illinois. Over the last 3 decades, he has advocated vigorously for progressive policies and political reform throughout the city and county. Garcia also sponsored an ordinance that stopped county officials from cooperating with the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Program that was identifying people accused of minor offenses who were suspected of being undocumented immigrants. Mr. Garcia attended the University of Illinois, Chicago, and earned a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in urban planning. While attending university, he worked as a paralegal assisting immigrants and people with low incomes. He was born in Durango, Mexico. Big round of applause, Mr. Garcia. Tom Saenz, Executive Director of PALDEF. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Saenz is the President and General Counsel at MALDEF. He is a nationally recognized civil rights attorney. Previously, he served as counsel to the Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. Saenz served on the 4-person executive team for the mayor. Before that, Saenz conducted civil rights litigation at MALDEF for 12 years. During that time, he was a leader in the successful challenge to California's unconstitutional Proposition 187. And he led numerous civil rights cases in the areas of immigrants' rights, education, employment, and voting rights. Saenz was born and raised in Southern California. He graduated summa cum laude from Yale University, and he received his law degree from Yale Law School. Thank you so much. Jenny Pasquarella from American Civil Liberties Union is staff attorney at the ACLU of Southern California. She joined ACLU SoCal in 2008. Jenny specializes in immigrants' rights, in national security litigation, and policy advocacy. Her work currently focuses on the civil rights implications of local law enforcement engaging in federal immigration work and the federal government's illegal blacklisting of Muslim immigrants to prevent them from naturalizing or receiving other immigration benefits. Prior to joining ACLU SoCal, Jenny was a legal fellow staff attorney at the Center for Reproductive Rights and the ACLU Women's Rights Project, both in New York. She's a graduate of Barnard College and Georgetown University Law Center, where she earned her JD degree with a certificate in refugee and humanitarian emergencies. Jenny? Nick Theodore, professor at the University of Illinois. Nick Theodore, PhD public policy analyst, is a professor in the Department of Urban Planning and Policy at the University of Illinois at Chicago. His research agenda focuses on social polarization and advanced marginality, and his recent work is located at the intersection of migration, economic insecurity, and community development strategies. In 2014, Professor Theodore was named highly cited researcher by Thomson Reuters. Thank you so much. Thank you. Patricia Suarez, affected community member. Patricia Suarez is a resident of Alhambra who currently has her son, Victor Calderon, detained at the Lanto Detention Center. Victor Calderon is a 32-year-old who has lived in the United States since he was 6. He is the father of 3 U.S. citizen children. Patricia has been fighting the deportation and detention of her son and advocating against detention centers that only bring suffering to immigrant families. Thank you, Patricia. Omar Hernandez, affected community member, is a leader in his community and is involved in several community-based organizations such as Inner City Struggle and Brothers, Sun Cells with advocates for educational justice and a more equitable, safe, and healthy education system. His mother, Omara, was deported to El Salvador earlier this year based on offenses from 16 years ago. Gracias. Thank you. Paolo Yara Riveros, affected community member, is a gender queer, non-conforming boy born in Lima, Peru, and raised in Los Angeles since 1998. In 2011, he self-deported back to Lima to apply for a student visa and pursue a photography master's in Madrid, Spain, but was denied. Paolo then lived in Lima for 2 years where he faced homophobia until he decided to come back home to Los Angeles with the Bring Them Home campaign in 2013 to seek asylum. He currently works as an intern at St. John's Well Child and Family Center's Transgender Health Program in South Los Angeles. And now we're going to have the opening remarks of PEP implementation, PEP implementation. We're going to hear first from Mr. Chuy Garcia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to join the organizers and sponsors of tonight's forum, and it comes at a very important time as a debate seems to be spurring nationally regarding ICE detainers, the practice that many localities and states all over the country have had to embark on because of Congress's failure to address comprehensive immigration reform. I'm going to share with you the motivation behind Cook County's ICE detainer policy that was enacted in 2011, what led to it, and what has transpired in over almost a 4-year span that our policy has been in effect. The practice of honoring ICE detainers was brought to my attention shortly after I was elected to the Cook County Board of Commissioners. I was re-elected last year to a second term, 4-year term by the way. And the county jail is located in my district, so I effectively represent the fluctuating population of detainees in Cook County that used to be 10,000. We have decreased it fairly dramatically over the past 4 years as we fight to create alternatives to mass incarceration because of their immoral impact on people of color and poor people all over America. We've been trying to be a part of a different way to approach incarceration in America. The ICE detainer policy that we have in effect is a part of that learning and the process of trying to do something about it. What I learned about the practice in Cook County that was happening in my backyard was that hundreds of people at any given time were being detained in our county jail for minor infractions of the law, such as driving without a license, because it was impossible to get a driver's license if you were undocumented in Illinois at that time. That no longer is the case. People were driving, moms taking their children to school or to the doctor, and they had a malfunctioning traffic light in their vehicle. And then lastly, some police departments in neighboring, the suburbs neighboring Chicago were engaging in racial profiling. In other words, stopping people because they were driving while Mexican, or at least that's the way they were being interpreted or profiled by certain police departments, not all of them. And it was resulting in people being deported, families being separated. As we researched this practice of ICE detainers, we learned that federal courts were finding the practice unconstitutional and finding that the practice violated people's constitutional rights, and that they did not have the full force of law. In other words, we were holding people even though there was no probable cause, and then it also came at a cost to the county. We had to pay for the extra incarceration of people from the date that they should have been released. So at Cook County, we were the first county in the country to cease all cooperation with ICE detainer requests. It was a spirited debate as an ordinance that I advanced was debated, was analyzed. The media played an important role in the debate, but finally it was passed on September 7, 2011 by the Cook County Board of Commissioners, restricting compliance with ICE detainer requests. The ordinance was crafted in a collaborative manner with the sheriff, with the state's attorney, with the Justice Advisory Council, with experts in immigration and nationality law, and with other immigrant rights advocates in Cook County and other stakeholders. The main reasons that we advanced in the passage of that ordinance was, one, public safety and the detrimental effect that local law enforcement's cooperation with ICE has on community policing, as described by Cook County Sheriff Dart in an interview that he did shortly before I introduced the ordinance. The separation of families, an indiscriminate immigration enforcement strategy that has resulted in the deportation of victims of and witnesses of crime, and left an estimated 80,000 people and children, rather, parentless in the Chicago region over a period of 5 years. An unfunded mandate, a cost to the county where we spent huge amounts of dollars paying for the cost of incarcerating people beyond the legal period that we could hold them. And then, of course, the constitutional factor. ICE detainers are not based on probable cause, so they subject people to prolonged detention pursuant to detainers, and that was found to be unconstitutional in several federal courts, including the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, where the city of Chicago and Cook County are located. Since 2011, numerous other jurisdictions have followed Cook County's lead by restricting this compliance with ICE detainers, and in recent weeks, the debate concerning local policies that restrict cooperation with ICE detainers has been reignited. But the reality is that ICE detainers do not serve a public safety function. In 2013, ICE lodged over 8,000 detainer requests against Illinois residents. Of these, more than 90% of the individuals targeted had either no criminal record or only a minor offense like a traffic offense. Detainers are not criminal warrants, and they still aren't, no matter what you hear or see on TV, especially from the mouth of politicians. And they have been imposed on U.S. citizens, including veterans, by mistake. At Cook County, we paid for lawsuits brought about by individuals who are U.S. citizens, including veterans. This is not an emotional issue, it is a legal issue. In America, we don't detain people without probable cause. The principle is not negotiable. That's the way that we approached it in Cook County. In Cook County, we have the largest single-site jail in the country. It is populated primarily by pretrial detainees, 70% of which are not charged by a violent offense, and it houses, well, back then, 9,000 individuals. Today it's under 8,000, and 100,000 people annually come through there at a daily cost of $143 per detainee. We need all the financial support we can get, but detainers wasted taxpayer money and threatened to cost more in the form of lawsuits for unconstitutional detentions. Existing federal grants do not cover the cost of detaining people beyond the time of their court-ordered release. This time, the time at which detainers go into effect. In other words, that's part of at least one version, a House resolution that's been introduced that would cut dollars to localities that are not in compliance with a new proposal that has been made. We're also a very diverse county, and to preserve public safety, we need the cooperation of all communities. Research has repeatedly shown that trust between local law enforcement and the communities they serve erodes when local law enforcement assumes federal immigration duties. Moreover, participation in immigration enforcement severely hinders the work of local police. They're told to slow down. And it diverts personnel and financial resources from local police's primary job of upholding public safety and addressing real dangerous crime and criminals. As chief sponsor of Cook County's policy for responding to ICE detainers, I respectfully urge you to oppose efforts to coerce local jurisdictions to cooperate with ICE's unconstitutional and ineffective deportation strategy. So almost 4 years into effect, what has happened in Cook County? Nothing. Over 3,000 ICE detainers have been ignored by our sheriff. Not one incident has occurred where a released immigrant has committed a crime. And we know for a fact that we've been under the magnifying glass with people waiting to pounce on simply one incident that I thought might take place by this time. So we have had an exemplary record to show, and one that protects the Constitution and people's constitutional rights. 2, public safety has been enhanced. And 3, we've stopped the liability exposure to the County of Cook. And we have saved money for our taxpayers. The incident in San Francisco is a real tragedy. It is not representative of the immigrant community. Unfortunately, it's been used, and the stereotypes that have been created, that have been used, especially by politicians, have created a media uproar. LA County can learn from our experience, and any county in the country should look at the Cook County experience because it shows that sound public policy can be the law all over this country as we uphold the Constitution for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joe Garcia. Now let's hear from Mr. Tom Sainz. Thank you.
First of all, let me thank the ICE Out of LA Coalition for their leadership in not only setting up this forum, but in advocating continually for better public policies around safety and the rights of all in this county. Let me welcome our immigrant rights champion, Councilmember Yosserio. Thank you for being here. And let me thank Commissioner Garcia, not just for his remarks today and traveling out here, but for his inspired leadership over many, many years in trying to ensure that what has been done in Cook County is an example for everyone around the country to, as he correctly puts it, adopt a regime that is respectful of constitutional rights while promoting public safety. We thank you for your leadership. As we review in Los Angeles County what our policies should be, it's important, I think, to remember our particular history here. If there is one leading lesson from the recent nationwide debate and movement about removing the Confederate flag from the South Carolina state capitol grounds, it is about the long shadow of history. The Confederate flag removed from the South Carolina capitol grounds 150 years after the Civil War ended, but actually revived 100 years after the Civil War ended by those who were opposed to the then burgeoning civil rights movement. It explains to us the influence of history over time. And the particular history in Los Angeles of police-community relations, and in particular police abuse of the immigration system, ought to give us pause in considering anything but a clear policy of non-cooperation by all law enforcement with ICE. It was only less than 20 years ago, in the late 1990s, that this city faced the Rampart police scandal. A scandal centered in the Rampart division only a few blocks from where we are meeting tonight. It demonstrated a rampant, deep corruption within units at that police division. Now that corruption extended to beatings, killings, stealing, but one element of it that never received the attention it should have, but was known by those who followed the scandal and those in the community whose family members had experienced it. One critical element of that scandal was the police systematic use of the immigration system, specifically the INS, to target those whom they could not come up with a constitutional and legitimate reason under criminal law to arrest and incarcerate. It came to light that the officers involved in that scandal would identify quote-unquote gang members whom they could not pin a charge on, but whom they no longer wanted in the community, and they would effectively turn that individual over to the INS. That's our local history. And we have to keep that in mind, even today, in determining what our policy should be in Los Angeles County. Now that Rampart scandal led to a change in the Los Angeles Police Department. A lot of folks think that LAPD changed as a result of the Rodney King beating in the early 1990s and the riots that followed. But what actually changed the LAPD and its corrupt culture was the federal government's intervention and imposition of a consent decree on the Los Angeles Police Department as a result of that Rampart scandal. Now, I would assert that, in fact, the LAPD changed. But it took federal intervention by the Department of Justice. It took a wholesale, well-supported, well-resourced effort to change the culture of the police department from top to bottom. Now, it's important to note, as recent incidents in this city demonstrate, that that changed culture, and more importantly, changed perception by the community of law enforcement is always tenuous. It only takes a few incidents for community trust to be lost. It is precious, it is sensitive, and it must be maintained. But the lesson from the history of the consent decree in LAPD is that there are, across this country, corrupt police forces that don't listen. The hallmark of these police forces is that the rank and file officers don't listen to the leadership. Following the Rodney King beating with the ascendancy of Chief Willie Williams in LAPD, the top of LAPD said the right things, said they were going to change, said they were interested in community policing, but it did not make it to the rank and file. It took the consent decree to get it down to the rank and file. So a hallmark of a corrupt police force is where the leadership, which is in power for a short period of time, announces progressive policies, and then you see the rank and file, who are in their positions for decades, ignore those directives. The lesson for history here is what I've just described is ICE. Today, in 2015, we have a president and even secretaries of Homeland Security who have said they're going to implement policies of prosecutorial discretion, of deferred action, of following established enforcement priorities. In fact, the rank and file ignores those directives. That's how we ended up with secure communities that was marked by its failure to follow the articulated enforcement priorities of Washington, D.C. The federal government, unlike with the LAPD after the Rampart scandal, has done nothing to change the culture of ICE, to change the culture of DHS. There is no reason to believe that under PEP we will not see the same disregard by rank-and-file officers, not all of them, but enough, by rank-and-file ICE and DHS officers to depart from articulated enforcement priorities and to sweep in people who no one would believe should be a part of this process of removal. I think, like Commissioner Garcia, that the San Francisco incident has been exploited wrongly. I think the lesson there ought to be that we should rethink using deportation as a tool of criminal justice for anyone. For anyone. But minimally, we know from history, with the LAPD here, where there is a history of cops, corrupt cops, using the immigration system, have used the immigration system, and where there is a history ongoing of a police force in ICE and DHS that does not follow the directives at the top. Those two history lessons alone ought to dictate a policy that is respectful of rights and has no cooperation between local law enforcement and federal immigration enforcement.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. I think it's fitting that earlier today I was reading a report from 2006, so 9 years ago, written by the Major City Chiefs Association, so written by the top police chiefs in the country, urging that police forces not be turned into agents of immigration, and urging for a bright line to be drawn between immigration enforcement and the work of local law enforcement. And I was particularly struck in reading this report that 9 years ago, all of these police chiefs got together and not only made these important policy statements, but actually identified that immigration detainers were being confused with criminal detainers, and said these are detainers that are not supported by warrants issued by judges. There are serious constitutional problems with this, but yet our police agencies across the country are already beginning to confuse these detainers with valid criminal detainers and detaining people. And so sitting here today, 9 years later, this report, seems to me, was foreshadowing a lot of what we've seen in the past 9 years. And so I want to highlight, sort of digging into the details, what's happened here in Los Angeles in those 9 years. We first had the 287G program, a program that basically turned sheriff's deputies in the Los Angeles County jails into immigration enforcement agents. They were empowered to enforce immigration law, and they were stationed within the release area of the jail and interviewing anybody that crossed their mind as possibly undocumented or deportable. That means inevitably using racial criteria to determine who they would stop and interview. As a result of that, as a result of having our sheriff's officers, who are entrusted to enforce criminal laws, not civil immigration laws, suddenly stepping into the shoes of immigration agents, what we saw was rampant civil rights abuses, right? People were being identified simply because of the color of their skin, because of their last names. One report noted that officers were pulling people aside because they didn't speak English. And we saw that people, including U.S. citizens, were being deported because of this, because we had our sheriff's officers engaging in immigration enforcement and wrongly identifying people who are not actually immigrants at all, and actually subjecting them to deportation. That program was in our jails for 10 years. A few years after that program started, we then had the rollout of secure communities, right? This was Obama, well, first a Bush and then Obama's signature immigration program. You all know about it, I think. Immigration detainers being the signature feature of that. And we had tens and tens of thousands of people deported every year from LA County jails because of this program. And then on top of that, we had ICE agents stationed in our jails. They had an office. They had computers, they had even cells that said ICE on them, where people were taken by ICE agents and housed before they were then taken into ICE custody. And so we have the combination of those things happening for basically a decade. And we've made some progress, right? It's important to identify that progress. Just a few months ago, the Board of Supervisors voted to terminate the 287G program, so we no longer have our sheriff's deputies engaging in immigration enforcement. They also persuaded the sheriff to have ICE close the office that had been in the jail for over 10 years. And following legal decisions last year, the Sheriff's Department agreed to no longer honor immigration detainers and extend people's detention beyond their release dates. However, the Sheriff's Department has continued to, although they're not honoring detainers, they've been continuing to refer people from the jails to ICE. That has not stopped, and they do not plan to stop it under their current proposals. Over many years of doing this advocacy and digging into what the Sheriff's Department was doing, we now know a lot about what was happening. And it's not just that tens of thousands of people were deported from LA County who should not have ever been deported, or who had only been arrested for minor offenses like driving without a license, or who had not actually been convicted of anything in the first place, or even charged in a lot of cases. We've had clients and community members who were simply victims of crimes who happened to be arrested basically by mistake, or one thing leads to another, they're arrested and then they get funneled into the deportation system. But we've seen really significant civil rights abuses, not just the extension of people's detention, but we now know that the Sheriff's Department over many years had policies, for example, that denied people the ability to post bail if they had an immigration detainer, which meant that they were stuck in jail as long as they were fighting their criminal case, simply because of the existence of a detainer. We also know they had policies that said that if you had an immigration detainer, you were not allowed to participate in early release programs. So that meant if you had an immigration detainer placed on you, you were treated differently than any other person in the jail, and were required to spend far longer in jail than your peer would. We also have seen cases, really severe cases, of people, for example, with mental illness who were declared incompetent to stand trial. I've seen a few of these cases where a person had an immigration detainer, is ordered by a judge to be released to a mental health hospital for rehabilitation services and treatment. But because of the immigration detainer, the Sheriff's Department had a policy saying if there's an immigration detainer, they could not be transferred to a mental health facility or for example, to drug rehabilitation facilities, and instead get lost in the jail system. One individual that I looked at or helped had been stuck in jail for 1.5 years because of this policy. So it's not just, we have to understand that the way that immigration is creeping into our criminal justice system has had myriad impacts on our community, on people's criminal cases, on the fabric of our law enforcement, right? And so one thing I wanted to just touch on is what the Sheriff's Department is currently considering now. We know that they've said that they are not holding people extra time on immigration detainers, but we know that they are planning to roll out PEP and participate in the PEP program. They have said that essentially every person that ICE issues a notification request requesting that ICE be notified by the Sheriff's Department about release dates and times of anybody being released from the jail, that they will honor those requests. And they've said that for each request that ICE makes, they're going to allow ICE the opportunity to come into the jail and to interview those people. They have to do those interviews within 7 days before the person is released. And then if after ICE interviews a person they decide to place a detainer, then the Sheriff's Department will screen them against the Trust Act, state law, to decide whether or not they will transfer them to ICE. The significant piece of this, I think, that's important for folks to know is the current proposal is that anybody that ICE requests notification for, the sheriff is effectively going to give notification. That means, and they're going to allow ICE into the jail to interview any of those people. So even if the Sheriff's Department decides not to transfer them to ICE, after screening them against their own criteria, against state law, ICE is going to effectively have the opportunity to go into the jail and to collect information about any single person that they're interested in. And this is going to have very significant consequences for not only people's immigration cases, but for the community at large, because we should not be deceived to think that this is just about a set of criteria that ICE is, saying they're only going to enforce their priorities, that the Sheriff's Department is only going to follow AB4 Trust Act criteria, but actually we're going to be allowing, according to the current proposal, ICE to go in and collect information about anybody that they're interested in. So I think that it's really timely that we're having this conversation, because there is an important opportunity for us to change and to push the county to reform this policy and to finally, hopefully, eventually opt out of these practices altogether. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. We're just going to get the PowerPoint set up. I've been asked to share some results of a recent survey of Latinos regarding their perception of the police in light of local law enforcement's involvement in immigration enforcement. We completed a random sample of 2,004 Latinos living in 4 counties in the United States. Cook County, which is Chicago, Harris County, which is Houston, Los Angeles County, where we are today, and Maricopa County, which is the Phoenix area. Respondents were asked a series of questions that explored their willingness to contact law enforcement authorities to report crimes or to provide information about criminal activities, and their perceptions about public safety in light of police involvement in immigration enforcement. Our survey sought to gauge the agreement or disagreement that our respondents had to a set of statements. And what I'd like to do is to read just a few of these to you and to tell you what people said. The first statement that I'd like to share with you is this: I am less likely to contact police officers if I've been the victim of a crime, for fear they will ask me or people I know about our immigration status. Fully 44% of Latinos across those 4 counties, fully 44% agreed with that statement. If they've been a victim of a crime, they'd be less likely to contact the police because of police involvement in immigration enforcement. Here's a second statement. I am less likely to volunteer information about crimes I know that have been committed because I'm afraid the police officers will ask me or other people I know about our immigration status. Similar finding, 45% of those we interviewed and surveyed reported that they agreed with that statement. These findings here show that Latinos are increasingly reluctant and afraid to contact the police to report crimes and criminal activity because they're worried that law enforcement officers will use this point of contact as an opportunity to investigate the immigration status of them or the people they know. We delved into other aspects of living in cities. We had this statement: I feel more isolated because local law enforcement is involved in immigration enforcement. 42% of respondents agreed with that statement. We had a couple questions around the mistrust of police. Since local law enforcement has become involved in immigration enforcement, I've become to feel like I'm under more suspicion. 38% of Latinos agreed with that statement. How often do you think police officers stop Latinos and Hispanics in the streets of your city without good reason or cause? Shocking, 62% of Latinos agreed with that statement. The responses to these survey questions, and there were others, they reveal a clear and consistent pattern. A substantial portion of the Latino population in Cook County, Harris County, Los Angeles County, and Maricopa County are reluctant to voluntarily contact police to report a crime or to provide information about crimes, specifically because they fear that police officers will inquire about the immigration status of themselves, their friends, and their family. Survey results indicate that the involvement of police in immigration enforcement has significantly heightened the fears of many Latinos have of the police, contributing to their social isolation and their mistrust of law enforcement authorities. These findings highlight one of the unintended consequences of the involvement of local police in immigration enforcement, and that is a reduction of public safety as residents' mistrust of the police increases with the involvement of police in immigration enforcement. Conventional wisdom within law enforcement circles is that for effective police-community relations to be developed and maintained, the police must forge bonds of trust with the communities they're sworn to serve. The willingness of residents to voluntarily contact the police when they've been the victim or the witness of a crime depends on these bonds of trust. But police involvement in immigration enforcement is driving a wedge between police and these communities, creating fear, mistrust, and suspicion that heightens the social distance between police and the communities they serve, and ultimately, as Pablo said at the beginning, undermining public safety in the process. Thank you.
Buenas noches, yo me encuentro aquí porque quiero compartir mi experiencia que tengo ahora con mi hijo detenido en adelanto. Yo cuando vine a este país siempre enseñé a mis hijos a tener respeto por las leyes, y gracias a ese respeto nunca imaginé que mi hijo se hubiera visto en esa situación. Más que él al cumplir con un ticket que tenía de felonía menor, él fuera detenido por ICE en la cárcel de aquí del centro. Ahora comienza nuestro infierno para sus hijos, para sus hermanas. Y no solamente estoy hablando por mi familia, estoy hablando por varias familias, que es muy traumático ir a esas cortes donde cada individuo no sabe cuál va a ser su futuro o cuál va a ser su vida, si va a ser unida con su familia o sigue ese infierno de estar ahí en espera, que alguien tenga compasión por esa situación que se está atravesando. Yo nomás estoy aquí para pedir justicia, para pedir unión y para pedir a todos los que están en sus manos que debemos luchar, que no nos debemos dejar, que debemos hacernos saber que no somos minoría, ya aquí en Los Ángeles somos mayoría. ¿Por qué tenemos que permitir que sigan lastimándonos, que sigan traumatizándonos? ¿Por qué? Con el simple hecho nada más de que somos inmigrantes, que venimos a trabajar, que venimos a superarnos. Aquí está la prueba de todos estos jóvenes que están luchando, y siento felicidad de ver que estos jóvenes van a hacer el cambio en nuestra cultura, porque ya no somos simplemente personas en el cual no sabemos expresarnos. Ahora todos estos jóvenes son preparados para el futuro, y solo quiero decir que sigamos en la lucha de nuestros derechos, porque los derechos y el respeto se ganan, y cada uno de nosotros nos hemos ganado ese respeto aquí en este país. Muchas gracias por escucharme.
Now we're going to hear from Mr. Omar Hernández.
be sharing my experience based on my mom's story when she was captured by ICE. And my mom had a small catering business with my dad. She would sell tamales, and she would drop off my dad at maybe at 4:30 in the morning. So basically when everyone would go to work already and they would sell them. And she was already going to go out to go pick up my dad at 7:30. And I was waiting already outside our house. And they basically they picked her up, pinned her against our wall, and they handcuffed her, and they just said that they already had mailed a letter home that they were going to come after her already. They were going to come and get her for deportation. And when we found out why the reason she was getting deported, it was because of a drug conviction that had happened 18 years ago. And just the thought that they thought it was still a good enough reason for her to still get deported 18 years after that, and after she already had made a family and everything. When my mother was deported, it was during May, and basically I was in the middle of already my finals, and that was my last year of high school. So basically it made me really made me focus. My focus not as great, because I was trying to graduate basically for her, because in our family she's never ever seen anyone graduate. She's never ever seen anyone go past the 4th grade. So she would always talk to me how she would want to see me graduate and go off to college. And so when she was finally deported, she was never able to come to my graduation and see me graduate. So I was when that happened, I told my brother that, because he's already gonna go off to high school soon. So I told him that hopefully when she come back and she can see you graduate, see me graduate off to college. After my mom was deported from the country, my dad he wasn't able to pay the loan. He wasn't able to pay the bills off the house alone. So we were basically letting off the savings that my parents have collected over the years. So we ended up having to sell the house and move into an apartment. But to make even matters worse, a social worker ended up having to come into our house, because the only blood relative that was able to stay with my sister now was my mom, and she was no longer in the country. So the social worker ended up having to put my sister into the foster care system, and basically split up my dad, my brother, and I. And she ended up having to go into someone else's house. So basically, we were no longer able to live with my sister anymore, because the only ones that were blood relatives was my brother and I. So she ended up being removed from my household, and it just made the household even less, even more quiet. Like, you don't feel that vibe anymore that you used to with a mom in our house. I don't know if you guys, you ever happen to hear those screams of your mom, shouting at you to do certain stuff. You don't hear those things anymore. It's a very quiet house now, and it's a very bad feeling when your family just starts splitting up apart. Sorry, that's my experience with this whole thing, and my mom being deported out of the country. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am a gender non-conforming I came here with my mom when I was 15 to pursue education, higher education, but because I did not have any papers or any legal documents to keep going with my schooling and work, after about 10 years of just working in restaurants and the little things that I could get my hands on, I reached the point where I couldn't take any more being undocumented because it was causing me a lot of stress, and I was always afraid that I was going to get stopped by the police and I was going to get deported, and I didn't want that. So I decided to self-deport back to Peru, where I wanted to study photography, and I applied for a visa to go to Spain, but that was denied. So I had to stay in Peru for about 2 years, and I was having a rough time after a couple of months that I had arrived there. I was facing homophobia and discrimination in many places, in public places and also at home. I guess my family didn't really believe that that was like homophobia, but just like the remarks that were done in the daily. So because of that, I decided that I wanted to come back home with my mother. She was still here in California. So I applied for asylum, and I was part of a national campaign called Bring Them Home. And in 2013, we presented ourselves at the border, and we were detained for about 28 days. When we were placed in detention, we saw a lot of things happening, but one thing that caught my attention after being released was the treatment of transgender women in the detention centers. Because these women are fleeing their countries because they're targets of bullying, of homophobia, or even getting killed for just being who they are. So they're trying to seek for safety, they're trying to live. So they come here and they ask for asylum, and once they get to a detention center, they face the same thing again, by officers, by other detainees. And I think it's something that we need to talk about more open, because not many people are paying attention to the LGBT community, especially the trans women. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, I started working with St. John's Will Child and Family Center in South Los Angeles, and I've been experiencing, I've been in contact with other women that have been undocumented previously and have been in detention centers. And the things that they have told me are very hard to hear. They're truly survivors. One woman told me that while she was in detention, they couldn't put her with the woman or the man, so they just had her at the side of the officer. Like, if I was the officer and I would just chain the woman to the desk, pretty much. So that's how she was held for about, I think she told me 4 months. So she had to eat right next to the officer, she had to dress, everything. Because if she was put with the man or with women, she would suffer from bullying. People would throw her things, call her names, just pretty much have a complete disrespect for just being who she was. And I think it's very important for us to remember this women, this part of our community that are more likely to be in danger, and especially in the detention centers. Right now in the country, there's about 267,000 LGBT immigrants, and they shouldn't be there. There's no need for them to go through that, to go to a very traumatic experience in their countries, come here and ask for help and being put in the same position again. So I would like to see a way for the detention centers, for example in Santa Ana, to be completely, to get rid of them. We don't need that. You know, these people, this transgender women, they come here asking for help and they're not a threat to society. If anything, they come here to better themselves and to look for a brighter future, and I think they need to be part of these conversations more often, because they really need their voices to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo. To all of you, thank you very much for your opening remarks. Before we start our community question section, we're going to recognize some of the elected officials, all the representatives that are here tonight. And we're going to start by acknowledging Council Member Sevilla. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. Blanca Jimenez, District Director, Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Thank you. Claudia Ramirez, representative from LAUSD School Board Member, Steve Zimmer. Lieutenant Alfred Labrada, Los Angeles Police Department. Carlos Urquiza, District Director, Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez. Also, Ana Diaz, representative from Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez. Jonathan Lee from Congressman Telu. Thank you. Lisette Escobedo, Field Director, Congresswoman Lucille Robo Allard. Have we missed any representative of elected official who is with us tonight? Just raise your hand and let us know, please. Thank you so much. Okay, we are going to open our questions section from the community. But first of all, I would like to ask if the elected officials here or from the LAPD or the representative would like to ask a question or make a statement. We can ask from the microphone. And you want to make a statement? Thank you, Sergio.
Real briefly, just let me commend everybody who's here. This is such an important subject, and I want to commend everybody who's here this evening. I just got back from Mexico last week, and I was participating with Dreamers in a week-long conference and with another half dozen countries discussing this very subject. This matter appears to be getting more vexing and more challenging and more complicated. We have a lot of work to do. I applaud everyone who is here, but I am also thoughtful about how challenging the future years can be for us. We have an important election in front of us, but I'm not real optimistic unless we can make inroads in taking back the House, and that we have to think about a longer-term strategy. We have to think about strategies that are not just political, but that they're legal, that they're community-based. I spent this afternoon with workers at American Apparel, and they deserve our support as they fight to protect jobs and to keep jobs here in the city. So I just want to commend everyone who's here. And thank all of you for your leadership and your presence. Tomas, if you have ideas for the city to continue to play a leading role, we will embrace them because I'm concerned that these challenges before us will remain. And so for us, as a community who sees this differently, then it calls upon us to stay united, to stay optimistic, to stay adherent to our vision that this is truly a nation of immigrants and that we must continue to advocate for immigrants as we advocate to move this nation forward. We are so needed, and your voices are so needed to be heard, and so I thank you for being here today.
Anyone else would like to make a personal statement?
Hi again, my name is Lisa Escobedo, and I'm representing Congresswoman Lucille Roybal-Allard, and this is a very important issue for her. As you guys know, she's been fighting very hard to get rid of the family detention centers. So this is very important to her. One of the things I will mention is, as I was kind of rushing over here, I called our DC folks and kind of asked, how's she going to vote on HR 3009, also known as the Trump Act. She will be voting against it because I believe that no DOJ grant should be held for cities who decide not to decide to act as sanctuary cities. So, just in support and anything that our office can do to help and continue the conversation, be more than happy to. And I've been actually working on immigration for about 10 years. I just joined the Congresswoman's team, so I'm very excited.
Are we okay? No more questions or statements? Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Okay, so we are going to open our question sections for the community. Ready. And we're going to start with Mrs. Maria Sanchez. Thank you very much. Let her come with the microphone so she can ask the question to the panelist.
Muy buenas tardes, mi nombre es María Sánchez. Yo como contribuyente de este país, yo trabajo como limpiando casas, vendiendo tamales. Por un simple accidente automovilístico, yo me considero víctima, en el cual yo no tuve la culpa, ninguna culpa tuve de ese accidente. A mí, por ser indocumentado, me cancelaron por 3 días en la ciudad de Torres. De esos 3 días me pasaron al departamento de inmigración. Yo viví una pesadilla, un infierno. ¿Por qué? Porque yo tengo hijos nacidos aquí. Yo soy madre de familia, soy soltera. Es una desesperación, como les digo, no sabía si me iban a separar de ellos, si me iban a deportar, qué tenía que hacer. Lo único que pedía era a Dios y suplicar que no me fueran a separar de mis hijos. Yo no quería que me separaran de ellos. Yo luché varios años por una deportación, pero también era la misma pesadilla. Era una pesadilla tremenda porque también sabía ese día de mañana que yo iba a ver al juez, me iba a decir que vas a ir de este país. Es por eso que vengo aquí a pedir que el sheriff nos involucre, no coopere con el Departamento de Inmigración. Y también quiero hacerle una pregunta a los oficiales electos que aquí están presentes, que es la pregunta esta, que cómo se van a asegurar su oficina que esto no les ocurra a sus constituyentes. Esa es mi pregunta. Si me la pueden responder.
Would like to answer to the lady.
¿Les preguntan los locales o a los que estén presentes?
No, a nuestros representantes aquí electos, como el señor Cedillo.
I would like to just comment that I think it's an important question. I don't think that it necessarily has to be answered today, but it is important to note that this issue has impacts everywhere. So it's no longer an issue that we can say, as we do legally, that immigration is a matter for federal officials. It is also clearly now a matter for state officials. They have to make California ever more friendly to immigrants. We can be, I think we are, but we have more to do about making this state the most welcoming, most integrating of immigrants, all immigrants. And it is now a local issue. And it's not one that can be confined to law enforcement either, because of the impacts in communities, not just to families, but to whole communities that what we're talking about has. So it is something that I think every elected official at every level should certainly consider what they actually, in some ways, report to elected officials. But we should expect in this day and age, every official at every level should be involved in trying to ensure we get the kind of community that is respectful of rights that we deserve.
Thank you very much. Elena, Mrs. Elena, she's an employer.
Mi nombre es Elena Leister y estoy acá para representar a Enrique Gómez. Él fue un empleado de mi compañía, una excelente persona, honesto, y fue detenido por algo que cometió en el tránsito, un ticket, y ahora está detenido hace 9 meses en el adelanto. Lo van a deportar. El problema de él es que en su país natal, El Salvador, su esposa fue asesinada adelante de sus 3 hijos. Él se vino para acá y ahora él, si vuelve para El Salvador, está en peligro de que también lo maten a él. Es importante que él se pueda quedar acá.
Does any of the guests want to comment on her or answer? No. Thank you very much. Then I have a question. We have a question here. This is to Mr. Troy Garcia. Could you please explain the Cook County Welcoming City Ordinance and how it has impacted public safety in Chicago, and how did Cook County move forward with ordinance?
Gladly. As I stated in my presentation, it's going to be 4 years since our ordinance has been in place. It's functioned very, very smoothly. There were warnings when it was coming up for a vote that we were making a great mistake, that dangerous criminals who were immigrants would be released and a menace to the communities and neighborhoods where they live, and that we would be regretful about taking an action like this. None of that has turned out to be true. As I stated previously, things have been quite uneventful. Not even one incident of someone released on their recognizance or on bond has occurred in Cook County in almost 4 years. All we did is abide by what the Constitution guarantees every resident of Cook County. So we've made the county friendlier. We have, I think, shored up police community relationships, which is critical, so that people report crime, people show up to hearings as witnesses and become an important part of what transpires in the criminal justice system. That is what you call integrating people into every aspect of what a good, healthy community should be everywhere, I think, in this country. So that's the experience, that's the concrete experience that we have lived in Cook County, and we've kept our county also free of liability. In other words, we have not been sued since the ordinance went into effect because we were wrongfully holding people against their constitutional rights.
And I'm sorry to complement those questions briefly. How have you responded to pressure from ICE, and how would you react to a similar tragedy in Cook County like the one that happened in San Francisco? Those were the next question.
You know, no single ethnic or immigrant group is a saint. People make mistakes. People of all ethnicities, of all groups, commit crimes. And they should be brought to justice when that happens. It is wrong to take one instance and to paint a whole people, a whole community as being the bearer of the traits of one individual. And I think that is what's happened with the San Francisco tragedy. People haven't asked, why wasn't a warrant sought and obtained so that you could apprehend this individual? It's also assumed that this individual had a history of violent past. Nothing in his past seems to indicate that. In terms of what I've seen was documented. The gun that was used belonged to a federal agent. More questions that we haven't learned any answers to before a rush to judgment, either to introduce a House resolution in the House of Representatives, or I hear that a Senate bill is coming, but no one has seen it either. Because one individual is supposed to represent 11 million people or 12 million people in this country. That's just wrong, and that's called generalization and stereotyping of the worst kind.
Now we have a question from Ali Popaka from the organization IDEPSCA. ¡Ay, Dios mío! Muy bien. Mr. Ali Popoca. Mr. Ali Popoca, thank you.
Hi, my name is Ali Popoca, and I'm not so sure about all the deportations that's happening in countries. I'm not so sure that it's kind of good. It's being pretty mean, like ICE and police work together. I don't think that's really well. That they're working together and being mean to other people that come from other countries. That's right.
So that was a comment. That was not a question, but that was a comment. Thank you very much. Well taken. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Francisco Martinez. He's a LA Brown beret.
My main thing is just a comment, right? I'm a first generation Chicano, right? I grew up watching my parents struggle and finding jobs, and when they did find jobs, they got taken advantage for just being undocumented. I believe there should be no limits for people that have undocumented, because they work 4 times harder from people that do have documents. They fight to give a better life for their kids and to live the American dream, but they cannot do that if they keep getting deported into countries when they come over here for many reasons, either because they're being attacked, or for many reasons that they cannot live in their own countries, or because they cannot provide food for their own families. So what I'm saying, like that, I strongly believe that there should be no limits for youth. Just like the gentleman over there that was questioning his true emotion from his mother being deported just for something that she did 18 years ago. That I find that ridiculous, because she raised a family, she made a family, and was trying to make a better life, not just for herself but for her kids. And for one thing she did, or maybe just one mistake she did, who knows what maybe she could have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, you know? Maybe not even her, but just for that, she got deported, and look what happened to his family. They got separated, and he had lost his family. He lost the structure and the love that he felt of his family. His sister went one way, his little brother went the other way. That is cruelty to families all over the nation, because many of them are experiencing this. I witnessed my mother happen to this for her. She got deported to Salvador. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry, people have gone too fast. I get really emotional, and I feel strongly about issues like this, you know? And I tend to just lose my mind, like, you know? But, yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like, I've seen this first-hand experience to my mother, to my stepfather. I never met my father, but he was the one who stepped in and took care of me and raised me on his own. And I've seen the experience that they go through just to come across the back and go through that horrible experience. The traumatized and the emotional traumatized that they experience, and physical traumatized that they experience, just to come back from whatever they were in. And so I want to say that we should have more limits for undocumented people, so that, like I said, they work 4 times harder to get what they want and to get what they need for their kids. And I want to thank that gentleman over there because he was brave for going up there and telling his experience. And I want to give my appreciation and thanks to him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have a question from Wendy Barranco. Mrs. or Miss Wendy Barranco.
Hi, my name is Wendy Barranco. I came here at the age of 4, and at the age of 17, I enlisted in the United States Army. I then deployed for 9 months to Iraq and served as a combat medic. Now, while I am no longer an immigrant and I am now a naturalized citizen, there are my brothers and sisters that have not fared the same. There is a community of deported veterans, American veterans who have served their country and who are now in Tijuana fighting for the right to come back to this country that they signed on the line and that wanted to pledge their allegiance and did so and laid their lives on the line. I could have easily been one of those people. I want to make sure that today their voices are heard, and I want to remind everybody that immigrants make important contributions to this community and to this society. Immigration is not a crime, and it's a natural thing that has been happening in history forever. I expect our representatives here today to vote with their immigrant counterparts, because we are all immigrants, and to vote favorably against this measure. Thank you.
And we have a couple of questions here for Mr. Tom Sang. Yes, thank you. Can you explain why you think ICE is a wrong agency? Why do you believe this, and what would you do about it? And what are the non-deportation related measures that the Los Angeles Sheriff Department can take to build trust in Los Angeles community?
But as I mentioned, I think we have every indication from the fact that announcements have been made in recent years from the top about prosecutorial discretion a number of years ago. Then it became clear that the administration could not implement that nationwide because they had officers who, at the rank and file level, who wouldn't follow the directive. When the DACA program, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was implemented in 2012, there was a lawsuit filed. This is separate and apart from the Texas versus United States lawsuit currently pending. That lawsuit, called Crane versus Napolitano, was filed by ICE officers who did not want to, politically, did not agree with what had been announced as federal policy. When you have officers who, at the rank and file level, believe that they can't ignore what their leadership tells them to do, and have a pattern demonstrating that they will ignore what they are instructed to do, that is the definition of a rogue police force. You cannot enforce policies, no matter how often they are stated, without changing the culture of that institution. The irony is the federal government knows how to change the culture of institutions like that. They did it with LAPD, as I mentioned, through the consent decree. But the same federal government that can step in and change a culture, work with LA to change the culture of the LAPD, refuses to apply that same learning to its own agencies in DHS to change their culture and ensure that when a policy is announced from the top, it will be followed consistently. There is no indication that you can expect consistent following of policies, no matter how often they're stated by the leaders of DHS or the administration. With respect to the second question, it is quite clear that the sheriff, which I hasten to add, does not have the same history of a consent decree changing the sheriff's department. That is not to say that it's better or worse. It is to say that there is not that structure to ensure that this is a police force that works to continue to build community relations. The sheriff can adopt a policy like the one that's in place in Cook County that makes it quite clear that there will not be cooperation with federal immigration enforcement, that makes it clear that there is a belief that there has to be a clear separation between those two functions, local law enforcement and immigration enforcement. That's not hard. It requires taking steps to requires taking steps to ensure that the entire department complies with changing from those past practices. And finally, it requires a willingness to step forward and say, this public safety issue that's been well documented in this conversation and others is more important than whatever the sheriff may believe he gains from using immigration system as a criminal justice tool. As I said, I think there's every reason to question whether that ever works. In my mind, the lesson from San Francisco is this is an individual who was deported 5 times and still came back. So how does deportation work from a criminal justice perspective? It's a demonstration on its face that it doesn't work. Instead, we have politicians who are going the other direction because it serves their political interests.
Thank you. We have a question from Miss or Mrs. Betty Haspera.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Betty Casteado y pues quiero decirles un poco acerca de mí. Soy una mamá indocumentada, tengo más de 25 años en este país y mis hijos casi, bueno, tengo una familia mixta, ciudadanos, residentes, acamentes y pues yo quedo en el limbo. Entonces, ahora tengo miedo de ser deportada. Soy activista, ando peleando por nuevas leyes, cambios y todo, pero a la vez también me muero de miedo. Digo, undocumented, I'm afraid, pero really I'm really afraid. Yeah, that's true. Yo tengo miedo de ser deportada. He vivido, como dije, más de 25 años en este país, aquí en Los Ángeles, y estoy enjaulada, me siento enjaulada en medio de todos estos checkpoints que tenemos alrededor de México, San Diego, Arizona. Entonces, con esta ola inmigrante que está pasando, con todo esto que empezaron, ¿verdad? Que creo que regresamos, dimos como 1000 pasos para atrás, tengo miedo de ahora ser deportada y qué va a pasar con mi familia, qué va a pasar con mis hijos ya no van a ir para mi país. No sé qué podemos hacer, no sé cuál es el futuro de nosotros, pero pues vamos a seguir luchando, ¿verdad? Lo que pasa. Y mi pregunta es, ¿qué va a pasar si esta ola sigue creciendo y todas las personas que aplicaron por la B60 y están con sus licencias marcadas, ¿verdad? Yo una vez había preguntado a la policía que, pues como organizadora trabajo con la comunidad, ¿verdad? Y muchas personas no quieren aplicar por la B60 porque tenían miedo de ser marcadas, ¿verdad? Tenían miedo de ser, pues, que las aplicaran fácilmente. Entonces, yo pienso, mi pregunta es, ¿qué va a pasar con estas personas? ¿Pueden ser target de las redadas, ¿verdad? ¿Y qué podemos hacer como comunidad? Y si se va a poder hacer algo legalmente sin caso de... Porque pues yo pienso que no tarde o temprano alguien se va a dar cuenta de esta maquita, ¿verdad? Entonces, ¿qué es lo que va a pasar con todas estas personas que aplicaron? Nada más. Gracias.
Well, I don't doubt that there are some who have preoccupations with respect to applying for the driver's license. But the announcement is that more than half the people who applied for the driver's license in the state are undocumented. Over 400,000, we're moving quickly towards 500,000. We're double what was expected, and we will move into the millions before the year is up. And so there's no question that the concerns that people raised are concerns that have not borne out for the broader immigrant community, and that they move forward, that this state is known as one of the most friendliest, immigrant-friendly states. This was my discussions in Mexico. What are the elements of an immigrant-friendly environment? One is an ID that people have confidence in. Two is mobility. This is provided for in California with a driver's license now. Three is access to health care. There is movement towards that. Four is universal education, and there's efforts with that from K through graduate school with the DREAM Act, with the provisions that allow for access to loans. And then finally, the point that's been raised by Tomas is there a coherence between the leadership of that society and the law enforcement agencies? And this is an area that we must be attentive to as we go forward. It's very important for us. We're very fortunate in Los Angeles. When you look at Arizona next door, when you look at other counties and communities in the city of Los Angeles, you have coherence between a mayor who has worked to revitalize the Office of Immigrant Affairs, more staffing, more resources, more tools utilized in that area, and working with our police chief. As Mr. Science has indicated, it took not only just Special Order 40, not just Special Order 7, but in addition it took the intervention of the feds. And then strikingly new leadership. But within the framework of when you look at the entire state and the entire nation, Los Angeles is actually in many respects probably the most pro and most friendly, except for maybe Cook County, immigrant-friendly areas in the United States. And so with specific respect to the driver's license, there were many provisions that were put in by groups like CHIRLA, like us, and like the other immigrant rights groups to protect and to make sure that this information was not shared, that there were firewalls that were put in place within the legislation to ensure that undocumented immigrants who apply for these were protected and those remain in place, intact. And finally, let me say this with respect to the leadership of the government. People need to appreciate this. This man and this state has put millions of dollars, millions, tens of millions of dollars to make sure that this program works. They're not doing that for some ruse. They're doing that because they want to integrate immigrants into the mainstream of society. And one of those ways to do that is to make sure that they have an ID that is accepted and universal. And two is to make sure that they have the mobility in the society. And they have put in the millions of dollars, hired 1,000 workers, set up the infrastructure, and continue to do that, and prepare to do that in the next budget, as well as preparing to put in resources to make sure that when DACA and DAPA move forward, that there are millions of dollars available to make sure people apply. For us, what we have to do is to make sure that we apply. We cannot allow 850,000 legal permanent residents to live in this county and not apply for citizenship. We cannot not allow citizens who are here, Latinos, to not register and to not vote. That is on us. That doesn't cost one penny. There is nobody stopping us except ourselves. And so if we want to move forward as a community, if we want to have empowerment to protect yourselves, as Mr. Science clearly stated, this matter now affects all levels of government and all aspects of our life. The best way for us to protect yourselves is to be united in moving forward and taking advantage of every opportunity that exists for us. If you're not registered to vote, register. If you're not voting, vote. If you're a legal permanent resident, apply for citizenship. But it makes no sense for all of us to struggle for these opportunities if we do not take advantage of it and organize our communities to do so.
Last but not least, we have a question from Alexis Nava Teodoro. You have a question for our...
So it's a two-part question for any of the panelists. My name is Alexis. I'm the Deportation Defense Coordinator Raiz, coming all the way from Santana, OC, who still has a 287G agreement. So my first question is in regards to that. So a couple of months ago, the LA Board of Supervisors canceled the 287G agreement. As soon as that happened, we met with the sheriff in OC, but we discovered two things. One, they're not going to get rid of 287G. And two, they've been honoring PEP since November 20th of last year. So they didn't even allow the, what does that mean? They didn't even allow us, the community, to have the process that the folks in LA are having now. So, my first question is for any of the panelists to talk about the archaicness of OC still having a 2D7G agreement. My second question kind of relates to the Senate hearing that happened yesterday on sanctuary cities. So somebody from the Domestic Violence Coalition from Washington testified about the dangers of following the felons not families sort of frame that the federal government has painted, so as to say that they're only going to go after felons and not families. Not that long ago, Raiz with the Immigrant Youth Coalition and many orgs that are here now successfully stopped the deportation of Rosa Martinez, who had 3 felonies on her record. 3 felonies. We were able to get her released on prosecutorial discretion. A lot based on the fact that she was a victim of a crime 10 years ago, and the LAPD certified the U visa, which now she's in the process of, and she's now out of detention. Now, we do commit crimes. We have criminal records, and actually, specifically not just for victims of crimes, which the person yesterday testified that a lot of victims of crimes who qualify for relief actually have criminal records and have felonies, but also particularly vulnerable communities, particularly like transgender folks, who their lifestyle is criminalized left and right, so they have criminal records. Okay? So my second question is, can y'all break down the dangers of overgeneralizing the offenders not families framework, and why that's not just dangerous for us who have criminal records and who will continue to do so as long as there's poverty, but to also make sure that we don't leave behind like our transgender community who's locked up in Santana, where I live, who have criminal records because their whole lifestyle is criminalized. And we also don't leave our black communities in the back burner by keep talking about this good and bad immigrant narrative that I think needs to go away. So those are my 2-part questions to the panelists. Thank you.
The 287G.
Yes, please.
The research results are clear. Police involvement in immigration enforcement erodes public safety, it undermines trust, and it drives a wedge between police departments and the communities they're sworn to serve. Not only that, as we heard from young Ali, these policies are mean, right? As we heard from Tom Sines, they don't reduce crime. And as we've heard from Commissioner Chuy Garcia, these policies can be changed at the local level in Santa Ana, here in Los Angeles, and everywhere else. These policies, 287G, secure communities, and whatever versions of these are developed in the future are ill-conceived and counterproductive. And it's imperative, as these public forums do, to impress upon public officials, our elected officials, that they must be changed.
Very much to all the community questions. Lieutenant Alfred Labrada from Los Angeles Police Department has asked us to make some remarks. Thank you very much.
Good evening, how are you? Muy buenas tardes. Muchas gracias. First of all, I'd like to thank for the invitation, the Ags Out of LA Coalition. We want to say we have a great partnership as well as not only them, but all the other advocates in the city. You know, I wanted to kind of take everything in and just digest a lot of the concerns. And a lot of these concerns we know are occurring in the city. I face them daily as the Latino liaison for Chief Beck. And we know these concerns are happening. As the Commissioner said himself, we've got a long way in the city of Los Angeles with LAP. Do we have much more to improve? Yes, we do. We have much more to improve when it comes to public safety, to better improve that relationship with that community. But we are pretty proud of the changes. The Councilman Cedillo already addressed a lot of those. Special Order 40, we've talked about that a lot of times. 1979 was implemented, we had that. But a lot of things have happened since then. Most recently, as the Councilman said, Special Order 7, we took the forefront on that with the Councilman and a lot of the advocates here that are here in this room as well, to change that policy to support the immigrant community so we don't impound their cars regularly. And we track that regularly, even before AB 60, to ensure that these vehicle inspection points, or if you will, these DUI checkpoints, aren't a ruse or a means for our vehicles, for our immigrants to be impounded. And we track that all the way up to the police commission level to ensure that officers aren't abusing that. And one of the questions was, is how do we track that? And the chief of police has vowed to ensure that that is not occurring. We regularly monitor how many vehicles are being impounded for unlicensed drivers. And we need to know why those vehicles are impounded. And I take calls regularly to ensure those vehicles are not only released, but also were impounded lawfully from the community. The other part of this is our support of AB 60. You know, as a councilman, one of the top leaders in implementing this policy, but we took a lot of aggressive stance in supporting this stance. Because for us, in support of AB 60, in support of Special Order 7, it was always important already for us to have the community, in this case the unlicensed drivers, to be able to have the opportunity to have licenses. So it was a win-win situation for the police department. When it comes to the ICE detainers, back in 2012, I know Cook County started in 2011, 2012 we started changing our policies to support that. Back then we were honoring about 3,600 ICE holds a year. We were pretty much every ICE hold we were honoring, because that's just what we did with ICE. We didn't know any better. And as we learned, our policies have changed. The numbers started dropping, as well as the requests started dropping, because ICE knew we weren't honoring. And we started making more stringent policies related to that. How do we track that? Our jail system is pretty aggressive in ensuring that a supervisor has to review every ICE detainer that comes through. We have to verify that through a checklist and ensure that every process of that is adhered to. I can stand here before you and say we have not honored a single ICE detainer request since the third month of 2014. So we have not had one ICE honored detainee honored since that year. Furthermore, as you all know, back in July 3rd of 2014, we completely stopped honoring them aggressively based on a federal decision. More importantly, a lot of calls have come in lately to us about our stance on PEP. We recently met with ICE LA Coalition, with the Chief's office, and we can stand here before you and say that as of now, there's no intention from the Chief's office, myself included, to implement PEP within the city of Los Angeles.
The previous question, the two-part question that was asked on the 247G, I'm glad that representatives of members of Congress are here, because one of the highest ranking members of Department of Homeland Security told me recently that 247G was ended last November as they ended secure communities. So it's what you were told is inconsistent with what DHS is saying. So I'm hoping that that will lead to some inquiries and clarification, and in fact, the ending of 247Gs in localities like the county that you mentioned this evening in your remarks.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Lieutenant Labrada, Arthur Labrada from Los Angeles Police Department. And we are going to ask now the panelists for your closing remarks. You have 1 minute each, and we thank you very much for being here. And thanks to the community and all your questions. Unfortunately, we could be here all night long talking about this important issue. But thank you for your questions, and thank you very much as a journalist, as an immigrant. Thank you very much to all the organizers for inviting me to be the moderator this evening. And we're going to close with the closing remarks from the guests, and then Mr. Pablo Alvarado will say goodnight. Thank you so much from my part. Thank you.
I just want to mention something very quickly, since Alexis was mentioning about our vulnerable communities which are as transgender women, and having Lieutenant here present. There are things that you have said that since 1979 there were not criminalizing, they were not targeting victims of a crime if they didn't have documents. But from what I've seen in my experience with transgender women lately, that have been victims of crimes and that have been undocumented, the way that they've been trying to survive has been through sexual work, and that's the only means that they can find to survive. And we have to recognize that we have to recognize that as a valid way of living, because that's the only choice that they have. And so when I see them, being victims of abuse, of physical abuse by their partners or by anybody in the community, they're still afraid. They don't know these things. They're not present here. They don't know it. And the only thing that they see is when they're walking in the streets, that they're being harassed by police. So I think that something needs to be done in that sense for them to feel safe, because they don't feel safe at home, and they don't feel safe in the streets either. And they're most likely not going to call the police for any help. So they're very vulnerable, I mean, just the layer of being undocumented, and on top of that, to being a transgender woman puts them at a very high risk, and something needs to be done about that.
Thank you for the invite and the opportunity to share with you what our experience has been. But we're gathered here tonight because of Congress's inability to enact comprehensive immigration reform. We're here tonight because of the President's refusal to make this a priority in his first term, and then become an elusive goal for the immigrant community all over the land. We're also here because of opportunistic and xenophobic politicians who will play whatever they need to play for political advantage. And we're here tonight because we continue to struggle for justice. And thank you for continuing to be unafraid and afraid, but continuing to struggle. And we've got to keep the faith. No matter what transpires in the next few months, there is an important election next year. Our community can help decide that election. It's hard to keep the faith because many of us thought that with the marches, with everything that so many people have sacrificed in the fight for immigration reform, that we would have a victory to celebrate. Sometimes the road is a long one, it's a hard one, but let us not lose the faith. We struggle in our part of the country for dignity and for justice for all. Don't feel that you're the only ones out there in the trenches. There are people everywhere, and if we persevere, we will see justice for all of our people and for all Americans one day. Thank you.
I want to respond to one thing that you asked about AB 60, and I really appreciate your comments and your sentiment behind the unafraid and afraid, right? Because I think what you highlight is that all of us need to examine all of the policies that we have with very open eyes, and that includes AB 60, which is a hugely important victory in our state that we now have driver's licenses for everyone. But it's not true that by applying you won't be identified for immigration. We know that immigration does have access to DMV records, and so it is very important for the community to know when they apply that if they are somebody that could be considered by ICE to be a priority for deportation, that application could identify them for deportation. And so I want to respond to that because I think it's really important for the community to know, and I think it highlights the growing just entanglement that we see, not just with our sheriff's department, our police departments, but with all of our agencies in sharing information with ICE and other parts of the federal government. So it's important that we all have very open eyes about these practices and about how they're impacting our communities, and that we continue to push back, to continue to talk about it, and continue to lift up our voices and our stories. I think what's so powerful about tonight is that we heard so many important stories about the impact of these policies on our community. We need to continue to hear those stories because it's those stories that will shape our policy and will change our policy in this city. So thank you all, and thank you particularly for those of you who have spoken out about your very personal experiences.
I'm sorry, they asked me to remind you to please turn in your translation little aparatitos at the back when you leave. Thank you very much. Now it's Mr. Pablo Alvarado, right? Or anyone, any closing remarks here? We're okay? Let's give them a big round of applause.
so much. Let's give Norma a hand. And thank you to our panelists. I think and thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you to the elected officials. Thank you, President Cedillo. Senator Dan Franklin might introduce legislation. Yes, we've made progress in many parts of the country. There are about 350 jurisdictions that have established some kind of bright line between ICE and local police collaboration. But all of those gains are at risk right now. So the senator might introduce legislation probably tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, we don't know. But it appears that that is the direction that it's going. So please make your phone calls tomorrow. And for the compañeros from Santa Ana, we want to have a similar conversation over there and across the country. We got to make sense of this immigration debate that has been polluted with so much hatred and so much bigotry. We got to make sense of it, and we got to bring humanity to it. Put the human face to the immigrant story. Is that an agreement that we have? Yeah. And for migrants and their allies, remember that the only secure community is what?
An organized community.
It's an organized community. Okay? So that's our responsibility. So let's recommit tonight to that. The undocumented people and folks who support their cause, and I'm sure that we're going to have the elected officials here with us and the folks in this panel to accompany this struggle. So I'm going to ask Dave Das, who is one of the students here at Loyola, who is going to lead us in a unity chant. So, muchas gracias. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Y que no pare la lucha. ICE! Out of LA! ICE! Out of LA! ICE! Out of LA!
Thank you so much, Paulo, and thank you all. I'm going to end tonight with a very brief poem by Conte Cullen that I think communicates what I'm feeling about all this in words that are better expressed than any that I could ever come up with. So this is Tableau by Conte Cullen. Locked arm in arm, they crossed the way, the black boy and the white, the golden splendor of the day, the sable pride of night. From lowered blinds, the dark folk stare and hear the fair folk talk, indignant that these two should dare in unison to walk. Oblivious to look and word, they pass and see no wonder that lightning, brilliant as a sword, should blaze the path of thunder. I think these metaphors extend beyond time, space, race, and all the other lines that we draw in the sand between one another. The simple act of extending your hand to another, to one who comes from a different world, or who wears a different suit or a different badge, is an act of courage, one which blazes a new trail and disrupts our tendency to put people into boxes. That destructive tendency to compartmentalize people manifests in our politics, in our laws, in our enforcement of those laws, in all the work that we do. Living in the U.S., we are well aware that conflict between people who are different continues, and our reconciliation with our own neighbors is an ongoing struggle. But nothing good has ever come out of the choice to stonewall each other. It is through the difficult processes of dialogue and peaceful confrontation that progress and reconciliation emerge. Tonight's event illustrates a uniquely American tableau, one that includes people from all manner of background and creed, and I'm so proud to have been a part of it. I hope you all are as well. On behalf of Loyola Law School and Loyola's Labor and Employment Law Society, I thank you all for being here. No matter where you stand on these complicated issues, the fact that you cared enough to show up means something. It means that there's hope for dialogue and cooperation and solutions. This conversation does not end here, and it's up to all of us to keep it going. Thank you again. Se puede! Se puede!
It's kind of hard to find. Thanks.
I can turn it up.
Yeah.